So as we continue to track the situation in Mozambique, where hundreds of civilians have been killed and many others displaced, we're now honing in on the plight of journalists who try to work freely and report accurately on the attacks that have been taking place there, and certainly challenging many who lived there for many years. Just last year, a reporter for the Palmer Community Radio allegedly left work for home at about 6 p.m. and shortly after texted a colleague to say that he was surrounded by soldiers and his whereabouts are still unknown. Many others have subjected themselves to random arrests, unlawful detentions, torture and assaults by Mozambique's military and police, and that's since 2018. Recently, a British journalist, Tom Queface, was covering the violence in that province and announced on social media that he'd been banned from entering the country for 10 years, citing political reasons. So, to give us a better picture of the challenges on the ground, so to speak, let's bring in a journalist in Mozambique, Tomas Queface, I beg your pardon, thanks very much, who's joining us via our video link. Thomas, thanks very much for making time to chat to us. It's great to have you on the program. I mean, is the picture I've just painted accurate? I mean, is it incredibly difficult to just go ahead with the work of journalists in Mozambique, given the insurgency?
Yes, the picture is accurate. The thing is not the limitation in reporting on Cabo Delgado has not been faced by only journalists. Even academics who, since 2017, have been trying to understand what's going on the ground, who wanted to interview the witness, former insurgent members, have not been able to do its work on the ground because the government have been restricting access to that area.
In what ways is this being done? I mean, we've heard in places like Myanmar where some of the military junta there will carry out things like internet shutdowns outside of intimidations. Give us a better sense of the ways through which you're being obstructed from doing your work.
For example, the Amnesty International once tried to do a kind of report on the situation in Cabo Delgado. They sent 2 members of Amnesty to do the report, but they were not allowed to go into the areas. They were detained by the police officers. Another journalist which you mentioned, his name is Ibrahimo. He used to work in a local radio in Palma. His house was surrounded by soldiers. He was taken to the military barrack, and no one never heard about him. Tom Boker, for example, he was doing a very good covering on the issue of Cabo Delgado on his blog Zitamar. Since they could not stop the blog because blog is something online, they couldn't chat it. The only way they found was to expel him from Mozambique in order to stop the covering on Cabo Delgado. So right now, the only way to get information from Cabo Delgado is by the citizens of Cabo Delgado, the citizen report. This is the only source of information. One of the reasons why we still don't know the real reasons behind these insurgents, who they are, who is the leadership, what they want, is because none of all of these groups have access to that province.
Let's try to place the role players here and how they fit into, the obstruction of democracy. You have the government, you have the people carrying out the insurgents, and you have the civilians. Between the government and the insurgents, help us get a better sense of who exactly is preventing journalists from doing their work, and to what end, most importantly.
Well, I think, the insurgents have been attacking populations, they have been attacking government officials. I think if any journalist could ever go to any area which is controlled by the insurgents, I believe that they will be killed as well. But the government has got a more responsibility towards its citizens. They have to inform it with transparency, with integrity. And I think that the government should be more responsibility on this. For example, in terms of informing the people on what's going on the ground, the government should be open to journalists, to the researchers, and to everyone to investigate more on the issue. So the government has been limiting access to that area.
Yeah. In that context, then, how best can people in Mozambique keep up with these developments? You had initially mentioned that it's actually through citizens themselves that even you as journalists are getting information. Does that mean that citizens have to essentially rely on each other to keep up with what's happening?
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's what's really happening now. For example, for the case of Palma, the attacks began on 24th of March, and since then there is no communication with Palma. But we only know what's going on the ground thanks to the citizens who have left that area. They've been saying that there are some clashes, and none of the insurgents, none of the parties in the conflict have control over the area. I mean, 100%. There's some clashes, and all this information have been shared by citizen journalists, and they've also shared this through SMS, through WhatsApp groups, and this is the only way we have, to sense of.
I mean, as we speak now, we've been able to hear from some experts who are warning that, the situation in Cabo Delgado is actually worsening. What's the latest information that you are able to gather from the citizens that are sending out information?
Yes, the latest information we have is that Total yesterday announced that they will remove all the staff from Afungi. And in the same day yesterday, the insurgents started attacking two specific areas. The Afungi compound, where the Total is building its infrastructures, as well as the resettlement area, which is also in Afungi. Just to give you a context, the place where Total is building its infrastructure were lived by I'm sorry, by citizens, and these citizens were resettled in another area. I'm so sorry. And these people were resettled in an area called Kitunda, and both Afungi and Kitunda are being attacked at this moment by the insurgents. And no one is there to protect these people, and we are fearing for the people in both Afungi, where Total has got its installations, as well as in Kitunda, which is a resettlement area which was built by Total to host those people that lost their lands due to this LNG project.
Yeah, it really is concerning, because at the heart of what we do, of course, is to look out for people who don't have a voice, who aren't able to necessarily shine a spotlight on their own plight in ways through which they should. What reprieve do journalists have, given what some people describe as the crisis in Mozambique? Are you also at the mercy, essentially, of government inaction and the mercy of the jihadists themselves, or are there avenues, at least, to try and ensure that that isn't the case?
I'm really sorry. Can you repeat your question?
Essentially, I'm trying to get to the bottom of what happens next for journalists. Can all you do really is to be at the mercy of the jihadists and the government, or are there avenues, even in whatever democracy is left, dare I say, that you can follow to try and ensure that there's a bit of justice in the work that you do?
Well, the only avenue we have is to rely on citizens. The government has not been open. Very recently, they tried to take a group of journalists to Palma just to confirm the government claim that Palma is now 100% in full control of the government. But this group of journalists came under heavy fire from the insurgent groups, which proved that the area is not controlled by the government. So sometimes the government tries to create a narrative that they have control of the situation, but in fact they do not have. And we don't have any access to communication with the insurgent groups, because, as I said, we don't know who the leadership are, who they are, how to contact them. So it's quite impossible to get any information from them, except if we rely on the ISIS propaganda messages that have been sharing online. So the only avenue we have is still to rely on people. But the problem is, once Palma is deserted, no one is there, I think it's going to be very difficult to get any information. Just to give you an example, for example, there is a town in south of Palma which is called Mozambique da Praia. All the citizens in that area left Mozambique da Praia, and the government, the area was then contested by the insurgents and the government. And right now, no one really knows who they control that land, who is there, and no information can ever come from there, because government doesn't say anything about Mozambique da Praia, and the insurgents as well. They don't have any communication with the the rest of the world.
Really concerning, because I remember Palma being touted as one of the safest regions, given the insurgency taking part in different parts of Mozambique. How far are we from even that region being deserted, as you mentioned?
Well, I think at the end of this month, it will probably be empty because prior to the attack, there were about 60,000 people living in Palma, and each day we have been receiving in Pemba an average of 1,000 people. So at the end of this month or next month, we will probably have Palma with no one left, because people have not been just coming by ships, but people have been walking to other nearby towns like Nangadi, Montepuez to Palma. So the town itself is deserted. No one is there. So I think at the end of this month, no one will dare to tell us the story, what's happening on the ground. We will just rely on the government information, which sometimes is not reliable. And the insurgents as well, we don't believe, because it's most of what they say is propaganda. So,
yeah.
As you mentioned, Palma was one of the safest places in Cabo Delgado, and populations living in other districts of Cabo Delgado are feeling themselves more unsecure, because if there is very big contingents of army in Palma, and these towns like Nangade, Moeda, Montepuez do not have the same forces on the ground.
Yeah.
They start feeling like any attack there will just be a human catastrophe.
Sure. Really concerning. Thanks for getting us in on what you know. Really appreciate it. One can only hope and pray at this stage that the situation improves. Mozambican journalist there, Tomas Queface, joining us live via our video link. Thanks very much indeed.